Okay, so let's start. On behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Economics of the University of Coimbra, I have the pleasure to welcome you to another edition of Cátedra OIT. And I would like to start by a warm thank you for the speakers of this afternoon, for being present here, for giving their time and their knowledge that I'm sure we will take profit of. I was lucky enough to be in this role last year, and it was a very interesting session. And I hope this year it will be as fruitful as last year. So I wish you all, speakers and audience, a good session. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all. Thank you for attending this 9th edition of the ILO-Chair. I will start by thanking to our speakers, to Dr. Paula Rosa and Dr. Luís Claudino Oliveira for being here, and of course to endorse my greetings to the Professor Humberto Rocha, the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Economics. As you know, we'll work in English, despite we know that we have many Portuguese students on the room, but the English is the language for the communication. So I would like to start just by making a brief recall on the how was created the ILO-Chair. I would like to come back to the academic year of 2016-2017. Where we just make a reply of the International Labour Conference. We just made a simulation of the International Labour Conference from the ILO. And as you know, the ILO, since you have some texts to read, not on ILO, but especially on social dialogue, for instance, and the ILO is International Labour Organization. It was founded in 1919. And one of the, I would say, the institutions of the ILO is the International Labour Conference. And the International Labour Conference takes place every year. And we have done that on the faculty. We just replied for the first time in a European higher education institution in Europe. We just have replied, made a simulation of the ILO. By joining here at the faculty at that time, more than 300 students, representing precisely the governments, the employers and the workers. So it's a tripartite organization. And since then, it was possible to create the so-called ILO-Chair. It was created in the year of 2018, I guess, more or less, yes, it was. And since then, every year comes to the faculty experts from the ILO precisely to discuss relevant issues on the future of work, related with work, but related also with the economy and also with the political issues, of course. And the last topics we have been discussed were, I have a list of the last, I will just make a selection, a few topics that were being discussed during the last 8 years, because this is the 9th edition. We just have discussed here the ILO history, the green jobs, for instance, the things related with the wage gap report, related with platform economy, the right to disconnect, economy of care, labor inspectorate, social protection, youth employment, new social contract, violence, harassment and safety at work, ILO supervisor system, World Social Protection Report, and so on. So we have been discussed a lot of themes during the last years. And today, of course, first of all, I would like to say that we had another speaker, Albertina, but she was not able. She got sick, so she's sick. She was not able to attend. So instead of having 2 conferences, we're going to have 1 conference with 2 speakers. Which means that I will present the speakers in a few very brief moments. On my right, I have Paula Rosa. She's graduate in geography from the University of Coimbra. She studied in Coimbra some time ago. Postgraduate in occupational and safety and health management. She's a program officer at ILO Lisbon. And at ILO Lisbon since 2017, she develops activities in the areas of occupational safety, health, labor migration, and responsible business conduct. She also collaborates in the network of the CPLP, focal points for labor inspection. And she's also the author and co-author of several published articles and guidelines, in particular related to occupational safety and health, education, and other world work issues. On my left, on the top of left side of the table, we have Dr. Luís Claudino de Oliveira, is Deputy Inspector General of the Ministry of Labour, Solidarity and Social Security in Portugal since 2021. With over 30 years of experience at the Ministry of Labour, held several leading positions within labour inspection services and labour administration between 2013 and 2021. Just to jump a little bit, to simplify, since 2013, he has been acted as technical advisor and delegate of the International Labour Conference and served as national focal point for the tripartite declaration on multinational enterprises on social policy from 2017 to 2021. He chaired the Biological Hazards Committee of the 112th and 113th International Labour Conference, which took place on 2024-2025, resulting from the Biological Hazards in the Working Environment Convention, 2025, and its supplementary recommendations. So they will speak about, as you will see, about the title is the new ILO Convention on Biological Hazards. So thank you very much once again. I would like to also to address my compliments. She's not here, but I will address the compliments to Dr. Mafalda Tronche from the ILO Lisbon, the coordinator of the ILO Lisbon. And thank you again for being here. So the floor is yours. They will speak around, I would say, 45 minutes, probably 20, each one 20 more or less, or eventually more, we don't know. And in the end, we have a space for discussion. So we expect you from you the possibility of making questions. If you are Portuguese, if you don't feel comfortable with the English language, please, you can put the question in Portuguese. We try to translate it if you understand your questions, but we try to translate it. So feel free to participate, because they are here to share information with us, but also to come back to receive any feedback from you. Thank you very much, and we'll start with the presentation by Paula Rosa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Director. I would thank the faculty for this opportunity to be here with you today. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and a great honor to be able to share some thoughts and walk you through the new Convention on Biological Hazards. And a very, very warm thank you to Professor Hermes Costa for making this possible and made all the arrangements to this session could happen today, and we been able to be here today all together and to share our insights and our thoughts about this. I don't know if you are familiar with ILO, because some of you, I believe, you have heard about it. ILO is an institution, was founded in 1919 after the World War I, with the peace, the Treaty of Versailles. I don't know if you knew this, and it has a unique characteristic among the agencies of the UN system. This organization works in a tripartite basis. What is the meaning of this? In fact, all the actors, the principal actors of the world of work, are the governments, the employers, and workers. So what ILO does, it's essentially a normative agency, produces international law, and foments the dialogue and negotiation and all has this characteristic of the tripartism. I think most of you already know this, and so I will continue with what it's new about these new standards. 2022 was a landmark for and historic moment for ILO and for the 187 members that are part of the organization. It was when they all together made a decision through a joint resolution, meaning the three parts interested, of course, all the stakeholders, to include safe and healthy working environment into the ILO's framework of fundamental principles and rights. And why this is a historical decision? Because from being viewed OSH, or occupational safety and health, being viewed as a good practice at the companies and at the workplaces, now it is a fundamental human and labor right and should be treated like this. So what it is means, the principle, the most important conventions on occupational safety and health, 155 related to the health and safety of workers and working environment, and 187, as you can see, are the core conventions, the core standards of OSH. OSH, you already understood what it is. So not to repeat what is always repeating health, safety and health at work, I will refer to OSH, okay? So these two conventions set or establish the core baseline for developing national policies, regulations, and with the major goal of protect workers and help governments and help the organizations to have their programs, and implement their measures in order to save lives and protect lives. So what is the impact of the alignment with these two conventions, and what's new in this new convention, and why do we need a new convention on biological hazards? I don't know, when we are talking about biological hazards, the convention is clearing and is setting the definitions and concepts, harmonizing the concepts between all the countries there were members of ILO, because this is not easy to make people understand and speak the same language. So this convention is all aligned with all the dispositions of the conventions, the fundamental conventions I referred before, and this happens in the time where globalization and increased number and emerging risks all over the world are increasing, and among the major concerns of the countries, especially after COVID-19, which had revealed global vulnerabilities in the countries, and many disparities and differences in what comes to being prepared and giving the adequate and the efficient response to the pandemics. And also because biological hazards affect all sectors and potentially all of us. All of us are in risk of exposure of biological hazards, meaning when we are talking about biological hazards, we are talking about dangerous agents like parasites, like like bacteria, viruses, and other products, and also cultures of cells that may be present on our workplaces, and without knowing constitute invisible threat to all of us. But of course, there are some workers in some sectors more exposed than others. We'll speak about that right after. But also, one of the new elements that was brought by this convention is that for the first time, climate change is considered a key element, especially for those workers who travels and are in contact with other persons from other countries, but also because there is strong evidence that the behavior of vectors, mosquitoes and ticks and other agents that can disseminate diseases and infections could be a major problem, and governments and companies and workers have to be prepared by to protect themselves and protect the economies from these threats. As I referred before, there are very diverse numbers of agents and pathogenics, including the genetically modified beings and products, of course, and that have potential harm human health. That's the meaning of hazard, which is different from risk. I will conduct you in these differences, and we will be able to understand the differences between these two concepts. And also, having in mind that the simple fact that here in this room we could have some allergens, some como é que se diz ácaros? Do you know ácaros? I don't know to say this in English, but the little bugs, the little microorganisms that cause allergic reactions. Well, potentially we could have this in this room or not, but they could harm us or not, depending on the transmission ways and the ways of penetration in the human body. But then we have during the work professional exposure, which means that if that occurs, the employer have responsibilities if the worker become ill or have an injury because of these biological hazards. So we have the risk, the definition of risk, when there is an interaction with the workers and the dangers, the hazards in this case, which is defined by the combination of the probability of occurrence times the severity of the harm that may cause in the working environment or in the context of work. Of course, this convention also brings up another issue that is new in the ILO standards, which is create the right framework and the space to promote an articulation and occupational health and public health. This convention talks about rights and duties and responsibilities and define what everyone should do and should not. And in this case, the convention main objective is to give the right protection, the adequate protection from works, and empowering them with rights and training and information and to know what to do, what are the risks, and what to do in case of exposure. Because the final objective is we are going to work for about a great deal of time in our living time, and it's not supposed to die or to get healed in result of work. So one of the main rights that this convention stresses, it's the right to refuse in unsafe conditions or to do work to do a job in an unsafe environment. And so also this protects workers from when having knowledge and reporting some kind of violations, legal violations in these aspects, not being retaliated with inadequate response by employers or colleagues or whatever. And also, if we get ill, if we catch some kind of disease or for instance, imagine I am a nurse, I am an immigrant nurse in a different country than mine, and suddenly I have an accident with a sharp object, with a needle, and I touch and have interaction with infected blood, and I could develop a disease. This is a work-related disease or professional disease. And so what the convention guarantees to me is social protection. And if the work has an incapacity and can't be able to work because he's ill during a period of time or forever in a permanent way, they have the right to be protected in the case of not being able to have a source of income for each one of the workers and their families. And also having access, universal access to health services and care, and of course, especially during the outbreaks and quarantines. Even if I am am a maritime worker, seafarer, isn't it? The correct term is seafarer, and I travel from country to country. My employer has the duty and the responsibility to ensure that I am protected from these threats. Also, one of the main objectives of this convention is to promote an effective management of occupational safety and health regarding biological hazards at a national level, by setting policies, regulations, as I said before, based on the best information and the best knowledge, with evidence, based on evaluations or risk assessments by the competent authorities. And also this brings me to the responsibilities of the enterprises and the employers, which in consultation with workers and the worker representatives, trade unions and other representatives, they should implement measures, but ensure that all the parts, the interested parts, can participate in all the process, since the identification of the hazards until the evaluation of the implementation of the adequate measures of control of these risks. So another important aspect is that for it's usual every country have an occupational disease list, which is in force of law in that country. And the calling here is to integrate all these agents, these pathogens, the ones I refer earlier, in this occupational disease list or professional disease list, if you want, because it is a great challenge, especially for those less developed countries. It is a great challenge to adapt and to formulate new regulations which have a huge impact on the enforcement of the law. But I would like to make a remark here on the government responsibilities, because according to a ILO report from 2023, only 47% of the countries have a formally established national policy of OSH. And in the less developed countries, this proportion is even less and accounting for only 26%. This reveals also, and once more, the great gap is existing among countries in developing regulations, which it's a complex process to do, but also in the capacity the countries have to not only to enforce the law, but also to involve other institutions in a form coherent and articulating with all the authorities relevant to the biological hazards control. If you are a manager from an enterprise, you might want to know how to manage these risks. And I'm talking about risks because we are already considering the work and the interaction of workers, the manipulation of care workers, of the health workers, people with animal jobs or animal products related jobs that are the most exposed, such as also the agricultural and forestry workers are the most exposed to these kind of hazards. And so the convention includes also some methodologic processes to facilitate this approach, and stresses out the need of the prevention culture and the prevention approach, which is based firstly and all in the identification of the hazards and the evaluation of the risks. And then you have to have in mind that there are some measures which are more effective and others that are less effective. For instance, if there is a situation in my workplace that I made an assessment and have a result that is highly, the probability of occurs, it's very, very high, the probability, and also the severity of the harm that it can cause on human health or human life, it's also high. And the combination of the two, it's my call for action. And therefore, I am doing prevention when I implement measures of control, and also measures, first of all, for eliminating the risk. But where I can eliminate the risk or substitute the equipments or the instruments or the products to others which are more dangerous, and when everything fails, I still have a resource which is protect the worker not in preventing the accident or the disease, but in minimizing, mitigating the effects of those agents, of those hazards in the human health. But the personal protective equipments are always the less researched because are the less effective. So all workplaces have someone who needs extra protection, and we are talking not only about people who work in high risk sectors and occupations. I gave already some examples, but also in occupations that involve traveling or contact with travelers. We saw this on COVID-19 with the new new viruses, new that were one virus was from India, another one was in China, another one was European, and all together it was very difficult to have immunization because the virus was always transforming. So the more people travel, the more the risk is more likely to occur. And also people with some other vulnerabilities. This word is my vulnerability in English, if you can notice that. And we are talking about pregnant, migrants, elderly workers, young workers, which and people with disabilities, of course, might need some specific measures to their case, and governments and enterprise should consider these measures. And sometimes what happens is we are implementing a measure that we think it is very, very efficient, but sometimes for those people with these other conditions, health conditions or other vulnerabilities, what happens is that that measure of control of the risk is also dangerous for that worker. So it has to consider those aspects when we are talking about the operationalization of the standard and the application of these procedures. I was talking about that already, the integration with the public health. It means that sometimes we are not working, we are commuting to work, or we are in a context of public health and could be exposed to these hazards. And so what the convention says is that policies should be coherent and articulated. The policies of employment, policies of HOSH, policies of migration, policies of public health, civil protection, etc. All of these policies should consider the biological hazards and work together in joint initiatives and applying these necessary measures. And also the standard stresses out the need of all the parts, the relevant parts, workers, employers, governments, public health authorities, and other authorities should work together in a close cooperation. And also there should be a close international cooperation by sharing data, by sharing information, and also harmonizing their legislation. This is just a brief reference to the ILO supervision mechanism that I put it here because ILO is not an organization with its mandate lacks the responsibility of enforcing these standards, enforce the law. We don't have that kind of functions. So we have to have some kind of instruments and mechanism to make sure that all members comply with the established dispositions in the standards. And so this is a reference to these mechanisms. So states have to submit reports in a regular basis. I believe the usual is 5 years, isn't it, Luís? 5 years. And then the states, the employers and workers contribute with other information and observations, and then there is a committee of experts that issues recommendations to the better way and the schedule and to comply with the dispositions of the standard. When a country has difficult to implement and apply these dispositions and comply with the convention that was ratified, because the ratification is voluntary, this is a binding instrument, okay? Only the fundamental conventions are not necessarily subject to ratification, because this is a fundamental right. It applies to all workers, regardless the country has ratified or not. He has to report, and he has to explain why the standard is not being fully accomplished, or what is the country doing to enhance their performance in what comes to accomplish the standards. But ILO also offers technical assisting and training, and also helps countries in the draft of the national legislation. I'm almost finishing. Just to let you with some bullets, some key ideas on what means building a global culture of prevention. Earlier, we were talking about what does the organizational culture has to be with this, and or to what can the organization can bring to this. Well, there are strong evidence that the state and the level of maturity of an organization in terms of its culture, it's very, very closely related with how the behaviors, the beliefs. Sorry, there's a mosquito here. Let's hope it's not the mosquito of malaria, which is also a biological hazard. But I was saying that there are some cultures in a state of prejudice in what comes occupational safety and health. There are really toxic, pathologic. And then there are other cultures that are very developed and very mature, where people talk about this all the time. Safety and health is in their thoughts and their behavior, their attitudes, and all the behaviors are safe, and people have the consciousness of the importance of implementing OSH, and the involvement of at all levels of in enterprise, from the administration, the top administration, until the most operational worker. All of them have an opinion, have concerns about their health and their safety, and all of them should be consulted and also heard in individually or in the collective voice about these things, and about the solutions and the ways to achieve a safe and healthy environment at work. Well, I'm going to stay here. And if you have any question, please feel free to go ahead. I'll try my best. Thank you.
I think that we can leave the questions for the end of the the presentations. Now I give the floor to Dr. Luís Claudino Oliveira. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if I speak from here or from there, but well, I can feel free to choose. Well, thank you very much. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the Faculty of Economics of Coimbra University for the invitation.
Sim,
Also,
aproxima-te um bocadinho.
I always do this, even chairing the committee. I was thanking the director of the ILO Lisbon office, Mafalda Troncho, and also Professor Hermes Costa, the invitation to take part in this 9th ILO-Chair. Also, Professor Hermes Costa, thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Professor Humberto Rocha, it's really a pleasure to share with you some thoughts on the proceedings and outcomes of the Standard Setting Committee on Biological Hazards. I would like also to thank Paula Rosa and Albertina Jordão. Albertina is not here, of course, but she's here also for presenting me with this very interesting challenge. Thank you very much. We're not just colleagues, we're with friends, we know each other's long way back. So I would dare to ask Ana Paula to help me rescue from my less than perfect English whenever necessary. So, which I'm pretty sure it will be necessary at some point for someone to help me saying some words in English. This said, Professor Humberto Rocha, Professor Hermes Costa, sharing this committee, the Standard Setting Committee on Biological Hazards, has been one of the most valuable professional experiences in my long career in the Ministry of Labor, more than 30 years now. I know what you're thinking, 30 years at the Ministry of Labor, you are always all thinking boring. It is boring, but it's just 5 pages. So we'll try to make it as easier as I'm able to do it. So why I brought some reflections on proceedings and outcomes of the Standard Setting Committee on Biological Hazards. The theme is biological hazards, but I would like to focus more on the proceedings and the outcomes of any Standard Setting Committee. Today it's the International Day for Human Rights. Labor rights, as Ana Paula was highlighting, are also human rights. So it's quite opportunity. It's quite timely, may I say, to highlight that rights without standards are not rights. So we need to assure some protection to those rights, and that's what the mission and the mandate of the International Labour Organization is. First of all, the context that led us here. The text is here if you want to see it. The convention, it's here, and the recommendation, it's here. 7 to 8 years of hard work from thousands of people around the world to produce this. So it must be any importance at all. Let's see if I can catch your attention. The process, it's quite important. That's why I want to make a reflection on proceedings more than the outcomes that Anna has already highlighted. Why proceedings are important? Because the process matters, because words matter, and in negotiation, trust matters. To have a negotiation, to have social dialogue, as you all are aware, you need the will to compromise for a greater good even. keep it that way. So the will to compromise is quite important, but the will is not enough. The will is built on trust, and trust must be built on something else. So you must have clear, transparent, fair proceedings in order to reach an outcome by consensus. And I'll explain what this decision-making rule by consensus, what it is in ILO and why it is so important. So first idea, proceedings matter because of trust matters in order for every stakeholder to be able to compromise for a greater good, for an outcome. Then these outcomes are international level standards, and it's quite timely, as I was saying, and also Ana Paula, because labor rights are also, some of them fundamental, are also some fundamental rights, some fundamental labor rights are also human rights. And it's assured some kind of protection, but it's a long process till we have international labor standards, and then we'll see if the ratification is voluntary. We'll have to see how it is applicable in so many different countries, geographies, and realities. This committee, the standard setting committee, was convened following a decision of the ILO's governing body in 2021 to place on the agenda of the 112th and 117th International Labor Conferences. This is the sessions of 2024 and 2025. To place on the agenda an item related to the discussion of a new standard on occupational safety and health protection against biological hazards. This was because there was a follow-up to the assessment of the ILO's normative framework on occupational safety and health in 2017 by the standards review mechanism, tripartite working group. Everything in ILO is tripartite. That means that we always can be an expert meeting, a technical meeting, it's the ILC, the conference, any working group, it's always tripartite. That means it has representatives from workers, representatives from employers, and representatives from governments. Let's not forget that the foundation of the ILO, the decision was made in 1919 from governments to give up their half of their sovereignty, and said, well, we just give half of what our decision-making power, we'll give it in half ways to employers and to workers. That's why all of these groups, all of these committees, the whole conference, there are always two governmental delegates, one employer delegate and one worker delegate. That's the basic structure. So this standards review mechanism that was implemented also had a tripartite working group, still is assessing all the normative framework, and they discover a regulatory gap related to this occupational hazard in a way to complement and supersede one of the first ILO instruments, the anthrax prevention recommendation number 3, that was adopted in 1919, and it was just a recommendation. And Paul already explained that conventions are legally binding. Once ratified, recommendations are not ratified, they're just submitted to the national authorities, and they are kind of guidelines. So they're not mandatory in that sense. Let me share with you that since the foundation of ILO, since 1919, over 40 international labor standards have addressed safety and health at work. Yet, aside from limited references to biological agents in a handful of instruments, the organization has never directly addressed this hazard category through a dedicated standard setting process. So the work of this committee represents a historic first. That's one of the highlights I wish to leave here today. Standard setting process means what? means there's a double discussion procedure in order for the conference, for the international level conference, to adopt a convention or a recommendation. That means that we have this group that reviewed all the WASH framework within ILO, accessed several regulatory gaps. One of these was this biological hazards need for protection, and then took it to the governing body. The governing body is also tripartite, of course, but it has a speciality in this constitution. Only some governments are permanent members of the governing body. That would lead us to another interesting discussion on the democracy and the representation of all members in the governing body of the international level organization. But this means the governing body decided to place on the agenda these discussions. And it's a double discussion. Why? Because this international labor standards making obeys to a very lengthy procedures. There's a need that has to be acknowledged to address it through a norm. Then we have the governing body has to agree on that by consensus. That means governments, employers, and workers must say, yes, we agree on these discussions, let's start it. We put it in the agendas of 2 consecutive ILCs, International Labour Conferences, ILCs. And then the office does what? The office is all the administrative, it's the bureau at Geneva that does what? Does a report acknowledging the law and practice in every member state regarding the protection of protection of workers regarding biological hazards, better saying, it's this. And they make a questionnaire. This is the white report. Yes, it is the white report. So this white report now is notified to all member states that with consultations with social partners provide an answer. On base of all those answers from governments, employers and workers from every one of the member states, it's 182, 187, I guess, today, 87, 82, oh, well, more or less 5, I apologize for that. With all those answers, the office produces another report. It's a second report. It's known as the yellow report, and that yellow report is the entry point for the first discussion at ILC. That first discussion on the biological hazard standard setting committee was 2024, and the discussion was based on this yellow report, on this study, on this compilation of all the answers provided by member states. And this is the entry point for the discussions during the ILC, during the first discussion that was held in 2024. Then, after this committee finishes its work, another report is produced on the results, on the outcome of these discussions, and another report is produced. It's the Brown report. It's notified again to governments within consultations, social partners. They provide an answer, and then based on those answers, it's elaborated another report, the Blue report, and this Blue report, it's the starting point for the second year discussions, and this Blue report, it's more concrete and more detailed. This Blue report has already the draft that is proposed by the office for the text of the convention, and the recommendation then through an amendment procedure can be then discussed. So this was why it took several years. There was a technical meeting. There was this report. There were consultations on these reports. There was a discussion on one conference in 2024 on this report, and then 2 more reports, and then the final discussion this year in June that led to the adoption of the convention and the recommendation as it stands. So this unique tripartite constitution of all groups and all committees has some advantages, but it's quite painful sometimes to work in these conditions. I have some examples I'll try to share with you. For now, let's keep another idea that the work of this committee represents the first time that the international community addressed as a whole the protection against biological hazards. This was also the first standard-setting process dedicated to safety and health, after the historic mark of that Ana Paula just referred to. And there was this decision in 2022 of the conference to include the safety and healthy working environment in the ILO's framework of fundamental principles and rights at work. Ana Paula mentioned the Convention 155 and Convention 187. There are 10 fundamental conventions. In fact, the value of these fundamental conventions is that even if member states don't ratify these conventions, they are still binding to comply with those dispositions, because it's, as they are fundamental principles and rights and at work, they result from the constitution of the ILO by its themselves. You know, by the way, which are the fundamental conventions. You know 155 and 187, we just mentioned it, but just let me, if I can group them, we have Convention 87 and Convention 98. Convention 87, it's on freedom of association and the right to organize. Convention 98, it's on the right to organize and collective bargaining. Convention 88, in fact, has a particular issue pending on the International Court of Justice. As we speak, we don't have still the decision, but the ILO decided, because there's a controversial issue between workers and employers to know if the right to strike is comprehended in the Convention 87 or not. There was no consensus on if it is or it is not, because the Convention 87 doesn't say there is a right to strike. They say it in the other way or don't. So the ILO governing body had to decided to address the International Court of Justice to make a kind of opinion, a juridic opinion on if it is or not inside Convention 87 the right to strike. It's quite controversial. Who wishes to address, you can go to the web page of the International Court of Justice, and you can see all the statements, all the parties that were involved and their argumentation. It's quite interesting, but well, you're not from law students, I believe, so maybe it's not that interesting. I give you that. So that's one particular issue. Another group of fundamental conventions are Convention 29 and Convention 105 that regard forced labor, the elimination or the prevention of forced labor. 138 and 182 regard minimum age for work and the eradication of the worst forms of child labor. Convention 108 and Convention 111 regard equal remuneration and discrimination. And finally, the last two, since 2022, it's Convention 155 and Convention 187 that regard occupational safety and health. This is important. Why? The protection of workers against sickness, disease, and injury arising out of employment is enshrined in the Constitution of the ILO, and as such is core to the work of the organization. While the means to ensure that protection must evolve, the principle must remain firm. Biological hazards faced by workers whether through exposure to microorganisms, cells, endoparasites, toxins of plant or animal origins, or other source of risks. There are plenty of examples in the recommendation. There's a definition that was one of the issues that was quite controversial, also the definition of biological hazard. And then the recommendation gives some examples. They are not all there. It's not a closed list, of course, but there are some examples, and those discussions were quite they were tense and complex and difficult and very technical, but there sometimes there were also lots of fun and some laughs, trying to see if a bite of a horse or a dog it's a biological hazard or not. When there were it's fun. At some point, someone was defending that the aviation flu was also a biological hazard, but of course, it's not aviation flu. It's bird flu. The aviation, it's within airplanes. So it was some more relaxed moments. There were some discussions on mold. In Portuguese, mofo would be a biological hazard agent or not. It was also quite interesting to see all those experts in the room, medicals, OSH, technicians, labor inspectors, and just guys like me just trying to see if there was some consensus on the hazard or not. So, but the important thing is this there was a common understanding that these biological hazards that are nowadays faced by workers are changing. They're real, they are pervasive, they are growing in complexity, and the COVID-19 pandemic was already highlighted here, affected deeply our societies and our economy in different dimensions. And I think it demonstrated that biological hazards cannot be viewed as niche or sectoral issues. They are central concern for workplace safety, but also human health and global economic stabilities. It was very difficult then to engineer all the solutions for these kind of risks, understanding that on the COVID-19 pandemic, the vector of transmission, if on mosquitoes, the prevention measure obviously will be to eliminate the vector. If you're dealing with COVID-19, we cannot just have a proposition of eliminating the vector, because the vector, it's our human beings and persons like ourselves. So, looking back, I still have more 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you. The intricacy of the matter and the diversity of stakeholders gave much complexity to this task of regulating the biological hazards in this working environment at a global level, and to fulfill this normative gap that I was mentioning within the ILO framework of rights. These discussions take place as we are here. So imagine that we have just a podium like this one with the chair and all the office team and experts from the ILO that work on these documents and prepare these questionnaires and access this information. And then on the room, we have employers, we have governments, and we have workers. Employers and workers have only one spokesperson, and that spokesperson is the vice chair. So there's always 3 persons involved in all the discussions, the chair and both vice chairs. So governments are not neutral. Governments are an interested party. They're not a referee. So they have also their political agenda. They have their government programs and national policies and legislative framework they wish to defend, and they are quite cautious about these international level standards, assessing if they have to change their own legislations and national policies or not. If they see it's for better, sometimes they do, but different regions, different politics, different views are within the room. So everything that it is discussed within the room, with screens like this, and everyone wishes takes the floor and proposes amendments to what we are discussing. So these articles that we have here on the convention and the recommendation are the result of that process, and everyone must be adopted by consensus. I'll explain what consensus means. And that's when we are engaging in this kind of negotiations, let's bear in mind that employers and workers, it's natural for them to disagree, to have opposite interests. So they are quite keen and very well prepared in defending employers' visions and workers' visions. And governments also. Governments, they have regional coordinators, they work by groups, they also have spokespersons if they wish so. If they don't wish, they speak each one from himself. So imagine what is the European Union that has a framework of legislation that is quite similar to this, defending this, and some other countries that are not very interested in this kind of legislation, trying not to agree and trying to give options in order to water down the text. Now I can say this, there I could not. Do you think China was in favor of this condition, of this convention regarding COVID-19? They were. Of course they were. You know why I say of course? Because it's a political game. It's not a question for them, for China, in order to say, well, we have a problem, we have an issue with COVID-19. All the world says we are responsible at some point for COVID-19 spreading the way it did. So what would be the best strategy? To start at this discussion and say we're against this, and saying, yeah, well, we feel a little bit uncomfortable with this discussion, or saying, well, no problem at all, we'll implement this, and furthermore, we have no problem at all with these kind of measures because we implement them. Years ago, we were already implementing it. So these negotiations are quite tricky and interesting at the same time, and workers and employers support this kind of proposals if they go in favor of their views or not. So they're also trying to catch the leadership of the room and trying to make some arrangements inside and outside the room on these issues. So why consensus? In social dialogue, and this is social dialogue, this is social dialogue at its best because it's the kind of social dialogue that will result, hopefully, in an international level labor standard that it's legally binding. So if it is a convention, of course, do you think employers are very keen on the adoption of conventions? And some governments? Typically, employers prefer recommendations. Why? Because of self-regulation. And they say that establishing good practices and recommendations and the supervision of ILO at the political level will be enough. On the other side of the room, we have workers saying exactly the opposite. They're just saying we want legally binding because if it's just self-regulatory framework, it won't assure the same level of protection. So then in the middle, we have some governments saying we also wish conventions and want a legally binding instruments, because within our legislative framework, within our constitutions, our way of living, our programs, we are okay with it and we defend it. There's also some points that we should not ignore, as the competition between markets and companies and countries. So European Union and United States, now we see in the news lots of, how shall I say, some controversy on at least the Trump administration saying in the EU recently, it's too regulatory. So that's why Europe is failing, because it has too many rules. If we have less rules, a vision that you know better than me, which I'm referring to, economy and countries and progress will be much better. It's a views. I'm not going to make a stand on that, but it's this you can feel in the room. And the governments express these views when they are amending any one of these proposals. What they have in mind is the defense, the defense of their own interests, and can be alignments between governments and employers more than other governments with workers. Consensus means that a decision can be made. When there is consensus, the chair gavels and said, this point is adopted as it is displayed in screen, let's move forward. And we do it by consensus. Consensus in social dialogue has the value of what is not consensus. Consensus means unanimity, but what do you think? It doesn't mean the absence of a strong opposition, of a strong objection. If you're discussing a point and someone objects really in a strong way, establishing a red line, there cannot be a decision by consensus. And decisions by majority are not accepted within the standing orders of the ILC. So it is by consensus or by voting. In social dialogue, at ILC and collective bargaining, at national level, regional level, company level, when you start voting, you start losing what this key element, that it is trust, that is mutual respect, that is the ability to compromise. If you're willing to compromise for a greater good, you have to let go some of what you are defending, and at the same time, the other part also should do the same in order for a parties to reach common ground. That's why I put this emphasis on common in the consensus. Not to repeat some of the parts that Anna there's one part that Ana Paula didn't cover because she couldn't. Between 2024 and 2025, the result of the 2024 discussion at ILC, the discussion was very difficult, it was very tense, it was very technical, and the time allocated for the discussion didn't allow the committee to address all the text that was proposed for the convention and for the recommendation. So we just able to reach consensus and common ground till the text that it is now almost the same, the convention. From the recommendation, we didn't address one line. So there were some quite controversial issues, and the ILO, the office, promoted some informal consultations that took place this year at the end of April, in order to prepare the second discussion that was held in June. That's informal consultation was just between the officers of the committee, so the vice chairs of employers and workers were there, and some governments. There were some governments that were invited as observers, and there were also some governments, the most active governments were also invited to participate in this informal tripartite consultation on April 2025, in order to anticipate some difficulties, in order to reach some understanding. Because if you have red lines, you can put it forward, or you can keep your cards to your chest. It depends. But at some point, someone must be aware there where the red lines really are. So you need to work and to build trust and to try to see if the room is more with employers or more with workers' view or more with government. Sometimes it also também happens. And this particular committee, the role played by governments was very, very, very important. I just have, before I finish, I have a conclusion that I would like to read to you. It seemed important to me, but I would just like to give another example how these issues are dealt within this process of negotiation. It's I don't want to say already that it is common within ILO, but a couple of years, from the last 2-3 years, the gender issues rise again at the ILO level, also at the Human Rights Council. There are some discussions around the gender, not about equality between men and women, but the gender. There are some countries that you are guessing which countries there are, the object, the phrasing or the wording of gender, if any, in any text. So in 2024, we're not able to reach an agreement on whether the proposition was so simple as this. Individual protective equipment should be gender responsive. This was meant to, in order to say if, protective equipment on biological hazards, you are aware that you have those kinds of equipments that are quite peculiar and quite special, but they must be different for women and for men. So the gender was put there because there are also the sexual and some other LGBTQ, I don't know, but there's a technical issue on this point. And some countries blocked it. We have to change the gender responsive. Gender responsive is no longer here, and sex responsive it's no longer here. So it was very important for some governments at the European Union level. Almost all except 2 wanted the gender responsive. The United States of America in 2024 wanted, in 2025 didn't want it. Canada wanted very much. So it was to see in the room workers, employers and workers accepting and defending gender responsive. So most of governments gender responsive except the Gulf country, the Gulf Council countries, you know, those countries in the Middle East. Some countries in Asia, like the Pakistan, also were quite active against the gender responsive. And Africa as an issue. So Africa, if it's as a group, it stands for 54 countries. So it is the bigger group within the United Nations systems. In dialogue also, when the regional speaker says, well, we accept this amendment, we vote for this amendment, we are okay with this amendment, is not speaking alone, he's speaking for 54. So if you count and you're trying to see if, well, if it's a red line for me, do I block it? Do I go for a vote? Is there a chance for me to win this vote or not? Because if you go for a vote, the room can split and the people that lose the voting process will be in a worse negotiable position than before the vote. So it's quite tricky. So workers and some countries, in order to have a convention, have to let the gender responsive go away. Besides, it was very, very, very important for them. So the ability to compromise for a greater good at some point reaches this point in saying, do you want a convention? Or you don't want a convention at all? Do you want a less better convention on these genders questions or not? So it was quite tricky, quite tense, but the gender didn't stay, but the convention is there. And just wish to, in conclusion, to get your attention for the adoption of this new convention. The recommendation provides, in my view, and also Ana Paula expressed that view also, if I understood it correctly, and I'm sure I did, a solid contribution to the promotion and realization of the fundamental right to a safe and healthy work environment. But let me emphasize that occupational safety and health is foundational to the ILO's mission to promote social justice and decent work. If you look into SDG 8, you can find there decent work, and you can find that the decent work is also safe work. In today's globalized and interconnected world, where the boundaries between workplace and public health risks are increasingly blurred, where threats related to changing weather patterns can lead to an expansion of vector-borne diseases in regions and countries like the COVID-19, for instance, where technology keeps evolving at a surprising pace, I may say. It's quite transformative and quite fast, where workers are exposed to a growing number of chemical substances and other hazardous materials at work. My final message is we must continue to advance strong, relevant, and modern standards to protect health and safety. Just bear in mind, sometimes it's not that obvious to us that OSH issues are normally the front door for some social rights. Maternity leave, it's an OSH legislation. Young workers protection, it's OSH legislation. And working time and the duration of working time, it's OSH legislation. So OSH legislation is not just the biological hazards or the chemical risk or the noise or some other risk or some other agents. It's quite important, and the main reason it's because of these tripartite discussions that reach by consensus these kind of standards have an extra value for member states to ratify and implement. And I think it's enough. Thank you very much for your attention and patience with my English. Thank you. And I answer questions if you have them.
Yes, thank you very much. Now we have a space. We have a space for, I would say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, more or less, to questions and answers about all this. And as you know, you have to write reports based on this. So if you have any curiosity, if you have some doubts, you can put it. Of course, I have some questions that I could pose here, but the floor should be yours first. Okay, so please take this chance, this opportunity to make some demands for clarification and for other types of questions you wanna pose. Okay, so I think whether we have a micro in behind. So please raise your hand if you want to put any question, pose any question. Anyone in the back? I think there is someone asking for a no. Yeah, Julia is asking for a micro.
Hola. Hi. Do states can make reservations before ratifying the convention? Well, I don't know, like for anyone that knows like the response, I guess.
No, the ratification, the obligation when after the adoption of the standard, if it is a convention or even if it is a recommendation, the obligation is to submit it to the national authority that is competent to ratify in the case of the conventions. If you ratified it totally, not just part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Though this convention and most of the conventions on OSH, I believe all of them, in fact, allow that a country who wants to keep some groups of workers or sectors away from these dispositions should justify. Why? Because sometimes there is another previous convention more specific, or when the dispositions guarantee more rights than this one. And so it is allowed for a country to make some justification and say, no, for example, military workers keeps out of the convention doesn't cover them because there is another rules, another legislation that are more beneficial to them, and so we are keeping them away from these dispositions. Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to add one or two questions, if is there no more question from the audience. One of the things I can be to both of you. It's of course one of the, I would say, concepts of the last I wouldn't say decades, but of the last years would be the concept of just transition. And just transition can be applied to many things, but I believe that it can also be applied to this discussion on the biological hazards. So how would you see this concept in your discussions? Secondly, I would say that that's a curiosity. I don't know if Ana Paula just mentioned this or not. She was saying that I guess that she mentioned that only 47% of the countries formalized or established policies on OSH gas. I know if it, and so. What would be the origin of these countries? That's a question. So from the northern countries or from the southern countries, or is there a model of ratification or just adoption of those types of policies or not? Thirdly, I would like to, if you could say something about that seems to be a dilemma between on the one hand, the bureaucracy associated with many of those steps that was raised by Luís Claudino, on the fact that when it was mentioned the standard setting committee was mentioned the steps for getting results and some different types of reports and different colors of the reports and so on. Would all this bureaucracy should be needed on one hand, but at the same time combining this formal and bureaucracy, it seems that there is space for informal negotiation. So how in your work, how would you combine this demand for bureaucracy on the one hand, but at the same time the space for informal negotiations? Okay, and the last one would be, if this makes any sense. It was very interesting, your definition of consensus. And also that example that you gave us, Luís Oliveira, on the end, it was when you mentioned that, I think that you gave this example, if the bite of a horse or the bite of a dog was risky or not. And this is interesting because, in fact, we have an open space for including for the classification. That's why when you ended on your talk, you said that maternity leave, young workers protection could be considered as HUSH, and not only those typical associated with that. So, but the question is about. Let me see, what is the question? The question is about: is there any? Do you think is there any kind of parallel between what we study on this course of the hierarchy of needs that are typical of the organization's level, types of needs that we have: physical, social, integration, self-esteem. Is there any type of a hierarchy of needs, a parallelism between the hierarchy of needs and the hierarchy of conventions, in a sense that what is the, of course, for you probably this convention is one of the most important one because you are focused on it. But do you think on the same way it is possible to discuss different theories on motivation, for instance? Is it also possible from the point of view of the ILO to set up a hierarchy of conventions in order to say this is more important than that because of this and that? Because as we know, the perspectives of the workers, employers, and governments are necessarily different. And so it's not possible to reach I believe that the key word would be the consensus, as you said, but sometimes it's not easier to reach that. So this is some possible questions that if you can complementary address for the moment. But we still have space for any. I was just giving some ideas to give you some pictures for for discussion and for your reports. Any more question? No. If no, we can give the floor for our speakers to comment or respond if you want to say anything.
Don't mind about just transition. Okay, so we have the most great challenge of the century and perhaps the humanity, which is climate change and the need to a more sustainable societies and economies. And the call for more sustainable energies and consume and production all is at the table for us to discuss what do we want, what are we doing to the people, to the planet, and that discussion, I think at this point, there is no one in this planet who doesn't know what these risks means. So just transition, but transition to what we can understand to a more sustainable world and to protect and save our lives and the life of the planet, of course. But just transition to whom? Who is going to transition to transit to where? So we cannot allow to leave no one behind, and we are talking about especially workers and people that have not the means or have not in a secure employment, and somehow are getting very, very impacted with climate action. Climate action on one side may save our planet, adapting and mitigating the risks of all the risks we know about the droughts and the lack of rain or something else. But sometimes climate action means also closing enterprises, closing workplaces, and leave many, many families without work, without an income. So when we are talking about just transition, we are talking about also people who doesn't have a formal work and work in the informal economy and are not protected from any of these. They don't have any protection because they are invisible, almost invisible. So when we are talking about OSH and when we are talking about biological hazards, we have to make this connection with climate change and with climate action. So ILO believes that climate change brings also many opportunities to create new jobs, secure jobs, and green jobs. Green jobs means a job which is aligned with all the calling for sustainability, but also are, how do we say, decent jobs. Have you ever heard this expression? It's from the ODS, the Agenda 2030 agenda. It's the 8th goal from the agenda. Decent work and sustainable economic growth. Go and see there. So it is the main the meaning of just transition. Okay, many people are going to lose their jobs. Many people are going to have more insecurity in the jobs, and we have to address these problems to guarantee that no one is left behind.
So all the others are for me. Okay. I thank you first. But these are $1 million questions, the 4 or 5 of them. Let's see if I can I change the order? Okay. I'm sharing just a view of someone that is just working within the Ministry of Labor in Portugal, all issues regarding to working conditions and labor relations, including OSH legislation. A relation that we had on drafting legislation and preparing national policy measures in Portugal were inspired, influenced by the European legislation and also by the ILO framework. And also it's the experience of someone that during 10 years, 12 years, I guess, worked within every one of those ILC as a technical advisor, as a delegate, and last 4 years as chairing a standard setting committee. First of all, for me, priorities and consensus. As the constitution of the ILO is tripartite, and we have 3 groups of interests there represented, all the decisions can be reached by consensus or by voting. The core of ILO, it's all about social dialogue. So it's all about compromise at every level. Since the election of the Director General, since the constitution of the ILC, the rotations of groups, the election of the persons to share the committees, everything must be by consensus. It isn't mandatory that it is by consensus, but the consensus for ILO and social dialogue and the world of work has a value by itself because of the result. So to establish priorities on which issues should be addressed, it's reached by consensus within the governing body. So it's the governing body in their discussions, governments, employers, workers, that through technical advice or if they feel the political need, they reach consensus on is putting on the agenda of the ILC certain issues, standard setting issues, because there are the discussions that are recurrent discussions or first discussions. For instance, on social protection, there's a recurrent discussion. Every 2 or 3 years, we come to the same spot, and there's a committee specifically constituted with a mandate to address and to assess the status of the art, if I may say, of labor protection or social protection. On social dialogue, the same. So, and then there are new discussions that arise because you feel the need. For instance, this project from ILO to update some of the conventions that exist on OSH. Next one will be ergonomics and then chemicals on the next years from the ILC, and biological was the first because of COVID-19 and its impacts was obvious, comes from a technical view. There was this tripartite working group within the review, the standards review mechanism that was decided to establish by consensus within the governing body. So facing the need, the governing body by consensus decided we have to address this issue. It's very important, and we all agree that the world should address this issue. sometimes it's just a political issue that itself arises in the agenda. This year, in this convention, there was the first discussion on platform economy. It's a standard setting that ILO is discussion on the regulation. We don't know yet. I think that is established by vote. It will be a convention and a recommendation, but it was by a vote. So all the negotiations suffered from that. But the need arises from this political sense and view that at international level, the work at the platforms, the digital platform, should have an international standard and a regulation. So it's by consensus, it's through tough discussions, but we reach there. Bureaucracy, yes, it's the other side of the same coin. It doesn't go that fast. On biological hazards, on the recommendation of apprenticeships, the last three international labor standards, we don't feel the need to be fast. That means we have some stability in the conditions. And one of the elements of flexibility, one was what Ana Paula was saying, answering the colleagues, saying that governments in consultation with social partners can be flexible within their national framework, not to cover some categories of workers or branches of activities. So that's an element of flexibility in order to promote the ratification by different realities. That's a good solution, but this technically, it's more stable the reality than the platform economy or the work through platforms. We are discussing it now in Portugal, whether the regulation that we established 2 years ago, it's fit to purpose or not. So it's just 2 years. So technology is advancing and the world of work is not what we think it is sometimes. So there's this dilemma really between we have to keep the process and the constituents of ILO don't wish to let the bureaucracy go away. They need the questionnaires, they need the assessment, they need the consultations, they have the government views, and then workers and employers must also have their own structures that have to do consultations. We have a spokesperson here, but he has to consult with all the members of the committee that represent employers from different regions. So they have to reach an agreement among themselves in order to have a position. Workers the same. For governments is easier. But the process, in order to reach a position by consensus, this willing to compromise, it is available that 2 years after we know that the countries, or we expect countries to be more willing to ratify conventions, it's important because if it's not against any red line or a particular interest, it's more suitable for ratification, therefore to assure the guarantees and the rights that are established within the labor standards. So these needs can arise from different points of view, but also the decision-making process of consensus. I know it takes long time, but the other way around, it's not that positive. During COVID-19, it was 2020 or 2019? 2020. It was the first time that the International Labour Conference didn't convene. We had a second World War, and some calamities all over the world, and there was always an International Labour Conference, except on the COVID-19 year, on 2020. And on 2021, it was half an ILC. We have the Committee of Application of Standards and the conference. It was by technology. It was not held in Geneva, and it was not. We were not able. The ILC, all the members were not able to negotiate anything that deep. And the labor standards are not possible to negotiate and to adopt by the conference. It can be lighter at some point. It must be lighter. Someone must reform the ILC. That criticism It's on the table, and now it's more harsh, even if I may say, but the process in law matters. The ends or the finalities, the objectives doesn't justify just any means. So it's important the process to reach a goal. Finally, not finally, informal negotiations. There are several levels of negotiation. There's this level of negotiation in front of everyone, but the preparation for this, it's not in front of everyone. So governments are coordinating. European Union has just a spokesperson. It's the country that has the presidency of the European Union, but the governments of the European Union work a lot before and during the ILC in order to have a position on certain issues. The other regions and their coordinations do the same. There's also this kind of thing that we have to be, it's the rules of the game, but they're not written. Sometimes we know there's a red line, but we also know that employers or workers don't want to show that that red line is. So what they ask for is to park the discussion, is to stop the discussion of that point, of that alinea, of that article. They ask to park it. If there aren't objections, the chair can say, even if there are objections, it's a chair prerogative to park it and to allow more space for consultations. This means what? Backstage, corridor, lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever it is needed in order for that group that has a particular issue. And sometimes it's very difficult to ask a country to vote a line when their own country, right or wrong, I may say wrong, has death penalty for gays. So it's not that easy for someone that it is discussion, that in these discussions to accept this kind of proposals. So we have to have time in order to have informal discussions and informal negotiations outside the room in order for governments, employers, and workers to establish or to understand how far they can go in addressing some sensitive issues. Bear in mind that workers and employers, and every country, every member, has a delegation to the ILC. That delegation is tripartite. We have government members, workers members, employers members. Governments don't say to employers and to workers which are the members, but they are there. But in this committee, we know that government officials are within their groups, working and coordinating. It's quite clear. And for me, I did that role so many times. I know what it takes. But on the left-hand side of the room, there are Portuguese persons that we know and who work here in Portugal that are representatives from unions or representatives for employees associations. And sometimes we need to talk. Sometimes we need to someone from the employers or from workers and say, we have a problem, we need Africa to understand that we cannot be flexible on this point. So someone, it is not us, but someone in the room, sooner or later, at a coffee break or something, will let the message go. So this kind of negotiation and informal negotiations are very relevant indeed. The informal negotiation, the informal consultation that I mentioned was a different kind of thing. It was the ILO, and everyone in the room in the first discussion understood that it wouldn't be possible to have these standards as we have it now if we didn't have some formal but informal, because it's not mandatory, but we had to make them talk again with less persons inside the room. So it's a little bit complex, but it's the way it is. The OIT legislation, I think it's quite important. It's what can I say without hurting myself that much as an official of the Ministry of Labour in Portugal. Every EU member must have a national strategy. You also have, but I guess we are at the point that we don't have the evaluation of the last national strategy, so we don't have an updated national strategy on OSH. What I think in this line of working is this. It's for me, in my view, I won't say easier, but I think the OSH discussions favors consensus. It's difficult for employers to not compromise on OSH issues when we are addressing the life and the health of human beings, of persons that work within a company. It's more difficult to say no to those kind of regulations, even if they are strict. And in this particular issue, employers were very, very, very demanding on the responsibilities of employers, but in the articulation, as Ana Paula explained, with the health public authorities. And I could understand the reason why COVID-19 came from the street into companies. So it's not something that we could prepare, and it's not a risk you could assess and prevent the same way as other risks. So OSH legislation in this kind of negotiations has this value of being the front door for some social rights. I usually give this example of the maternity leave because it's something that if you ask anyone in the streets what you think about maternity leave, okay, of course, we are in favor and we think in the mother and the baby. But the legislation that allows it's on the protection of the woman that works and gives birth. And it extended to the father's leave also. So the boundaries extend. In Portugal and at European Union level, there are 19 specific directives on OSH. There's a framework directive on OSH issues, and then we have 19. One of them, it's the working time directive. It is so complex, and it's such a point of controversy, even at the collective bargaining level within companies. So we usually look at it as a trade-off, time of work for payment, for remuneration, but that directive that influences our legislation and the other members of the European Union level, it's a OSH directive with some flexible elements, of course. But the protection on the limitation, the protection of workers through the limitation of the working time, it's occupation safety and health legislation. I talked too much, I know, sorry. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kasper. I just would like to pass the floor to Professor Humberto just to close, but finally, just want to say a message. Don't forget there is an attendance list passing you. Don't forget to sign it and to give it back on the end. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So we are finishing. Thank you all for assisting this very interesting session. In particular, thank you to the speakers for these insightful presentations and for these interesting debates. It was not clear to me if a dog bite is a biological hazard, but it sure is a risk. So, but I think the ones that are taking notes for a class, I think you have a lot of good information for your works. Thank you.